Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. In this video, final thoughts for the showdown between Jarrell Big Pharmacy Miller and Andy Ruiz Jr, which features on the Crawford-Madrimov undercard. This is a Saudi-backed Riyadh season card in Los Angeles, and the weigh-in actually has thrown up a few interesting things, and I think for Ruiz, a bit of a red flag, and for Miller, he's actually come in lighter than he has for 6 years. So just like Walgreens share price is down, so too Jarrell Big Pharmacy Miller's weight. He's down over 25 pounds, the lightest he's been in 6 years, 305 pounds on the scale. So we haven't seen that since he weighed in at 304 pounds against Johan Dorper, and that was back in 2018. As we know, he hasn't always been fighting in the past 6 years because of some of his antics outside of the ring, taking substances of various descriptions. Andy Ruiz Jr, 274 pounds. And for a guy that's been out of the ring for about 2 years, yeah, that's not great. The inactivity, and he's also 6 pounds heavier than he was for that Ortiz fight. So he was 268 for that one. And I certainly believe the best version of Andy Ruiz Jr is around 245 to 255 pounds. I don't think that this is going to help him, and actually this sways my prediction for this fight. So you have Jarrell Miller and Andy Ruiz Jr, and Ruiz no doubt sucking in the gut here. I just think this is too much. Andy Ruiz Jr, notorious for the inactivity, but also the on and off again training, not always dedicated to his craft. And I think at some point, 34 years old at this point, it's going to catch up with him. And I think potentially this could be the fight. And he may argue that he's come in a bit heavier than he otherwise would have for different opponents because of Jarrell Miller's heft and bulk, and he doesn't want to be pushed back and worn down by Miller. But the thing is, the Uno reverse that has been played by Miller is coming in at 305. The Miller of 333 pounds against Daniel Dubois had, 7 or so really good rounds, and then he basically faded and was taken out. And if Miller is clean, and we're understanding that he is, and that there's been testing ahead of this fight, then you have a case with a Miller with more preparation time, a much longer camp. He was somewhat short notice for that fight, far less time to prepare than he's had for this one. Miller could actually have a lot more in the tank, be able to go for longer. And because the way that Miller fights, throwing a lot of punches, coming forward, just using volume, this could be very good for him in terms of the activity and the output and the ability to, use that engine for longer rather than at 333 becoming tired and a lot more hittable. He's not going to be hard to find. I mean, Jarrell Miller with a certain style will, put the earmuffs on and come forward, look to work away with a lot of volume. And Andy Ruiz Jr, you've got a guy that's effectively a front foot counterpuncher. He's going to be looking to rip in hooks and, right hands, to body and head, and he'll have success. And it could end up being a similar situation to Chisora in the Joyce fight, where you had Derek Chisora landing the more eye-catching shots, and that could be Andy Ruiz Jr, but Jarrell Miller landing a lot more shots, a lot more variety, and just working in and potentially stealing rounds that way. And I think in a case of being out of the ring for 2 years, and we don't know really where he's at, I think this favors Miller in terms of Miller coming in a lot better shape. And for 305, for a lot of boxers, you wouldn't say, a lot of guys look good at 305, but Miller looks pretty decent here. But Ruiz here clearly sucking in the gut for the cameras, and he'll be clearly muffin topping over his shorts. It's going to look a lot more stark on fight night when they're in the ring together. He's not a guy that, despite wearing hand speed, he's not going to throw a lot of punches, compared to Miller. It's going to be a case he'll be looking to work certain shots, but he's not a guy noted for his huge volume. And I think at 274, the later it goes in the fight, he may start to have a few problems, get a bit tired. So we'll have to see. I mean, how dedicated has Andy Ruiz Jr. been in training camp? How dedicated has he been to the sport of boxing lately? He has been out for so long, and, he was calling for and training and, in 2023, all that sort of stuff as well. And towards the end of that year, and this is about a year ago, the difference is stark. This is 1 year ago, September 16, Andy Ruiz Jr. in much better shape. Different clips from that time, you can see he's in much better condition than he is now. So I think potentially this could be a misstep, and it could be a case that Andy Ruiz Jr., his dedication potentially could catch up to him. And one of the other things I don't like, and Ruiz is always banging on about a Joshua rematch, but they actually put out a press release in Fight Week talking about he'd love to run it back with Joseph Parker. And that's always a red flag for me when an opponent is overlooking the guy that's in front of him. And Jarrell Miller is a hard out for anyone. Remembering that Daniel Dubois fight, Jarrell Miller had Dubois on the rack. It looked like he was, almost had him gone and ready to go in, the 6th or 7th round. But Dubois hung in there, showed a lot of grit and determination. And then at a certain point, Miller just ran out of gas, and Dubois got a second wind and stopped him very late on. So the fact that Andy Ruiz is heavier, seemingly maybe overlooking him, and actually I'll just go to the press release comment. So he says, I know that he's coming hungry, I know that he wants to win, but so do I want to win, I'm hungry and I'm motivated, I'm physically ready and prepared, let's do this. So he says he's hungry twice in that, couple of sentences of quote, and it looks like he was hungry in training camp, because it looks like he's still wearing some of whatever he was eating. I don't think that this is the ideal situation and scenario for Ruiz. I think he's making it tougher for himself than he had. If Ruiz was 250 pounds, 255, somewhere there or thereabouts, I would, be favouring him, I think, to win this one. I mean, also remembering, he had Luis Ortiz down a couple of times in that fight, a shot version of Luis Ortiz, and couldn't finish him off. I think this could be a scenario where you have Jarrell Miller tracking forward, throwing his volume, and that pressure could end up mounting on Ruiz, and he could end up feeling that significantly. And I think there could be a case later in the fight where you have Miller up on the cards and Ruiz is going to need a knockout. He's got good pop, but Miller's also got a very good chin. I don't think that losing, 25, 30 pounds is going to affect Miller greatly, because he's already a huge hunk of a human. He's not dropping down to 250. I think that's where I'd have concerns for him about potentially, has he, stripped too much back. But I think an effective Miller, and I've been saying this for some considerable time, is going to be far more effective at around, 290, 300 pounds than 320 or 330. And if he's clean, he has to be a little bit lighter, because he needs that extra, energy to go. He needs the energy to go further now that he's off the juice. Well, presumably off the juice. Hopefully the big pharmacy days are gone, because if he fails a test or something like that, his career is absolutely over, I would say. He's already a multiple-time offender. For Ruiz Jr., he's a multiple-time offender of not really being as disciplined and dedicated. We've seen it before. And the guy's only actually had, 3 fights since he lost to Anthony Joshua in 2019. He's been on the shelf largely. He fought Luis Ortiz and Chris Arreola since the Joshua loss, and this is his 3rd fight in 5 years. And he's, come out of shape, to some extent for this one. I don't think this is good news for Ruiz. I'm picking Miller. I'm picking him by points. I think he's going to try to grind him into the dust. If it turns out the other way, it is what it is. It's sure to be a competitive fight, but I think Miller coming in much better shape gives himself a much better opportunity to execute the sort of game plan that we know he wants to execute. Ruiz Jr., won't be throwing as much. He'll be looking for big shots. He'll be finding them at times, but I think Jarrell Miller will just land more. And at some point, he really is going to start racking up the rounds in, I think, an unassailable lead. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter. Boxing_squared. I'm out.